Hey everybody, I'm back working on the Cadillac a little more. And this time I'm checking out the ECM. I'm pretty sure what I'm going to find, but I'm going to check out the idle speed control circuit and just do some voltage checks here before I go to pull out the ECM and replace it. And then I expect to go under hood, and there's another test I can do on the idle speed control motor just to see if it's good or not. But anyway, here in just a moment. So I removed the ECM. It's not the shop manual. Just says take out three screws or three nuts and drop it down. Well, it wasn't quite that easy. There was a bracket I pulled down. There's still one attached. I disconnected the hose to there's a I think baro sensor up above that I took the hose off. I think I could have or should have gone in here to the glove box and pulled the liner out, because what was holding me up was this bracket that's still attached, and there's a nut down here. Right now the ECM's upside down. If you roll it over and flip it up, that nut is on the top, and this part of the bracket is down and goes into the air conditioning housing. So I think if I pulled the liner out of the glove box, I could reach that nut, and I wouldn't have had to go through all the fussing around to pull as much bracket apart. Anyhow, I've also been working here. I pulled out the terminal lock that makes sure the terminals can't back out, so that I get a clear shot. It's the one I want to catch is this light blue one up here. And I don't know, I've been kind of struggling with this a little bit. With the blue piece in there, you can't really see the connection, and I don't want to risk shorting across. I also did, after I brought it down, I hooked the ground strap back up to it. I got the battery hooked up. I just want to check and see if I've got proper voltage signal here. I've looked at the harnesses. I don't see any damage, so I don't see any reason why this should be shorted to power, which is what the previous test seemed to indicate. So anyhow, that's what I'm going to try to do here in just a second. I've got my little meter, and it's sitting here ready to go. This will be a little bit fun because I don't know that I got enough hands, but I will try to do is put one of these. I got myself an alligator clip, and I just clipped the ground cable to the bracket. The circuit that I want, the idle speed driver high one, is called light blue, and it's supposed to be terminal number 6. So if I pick up terminal, I've got the ignition turned on, nothing else, just the ignition on, and the speed control motor is disconnected. So this should just be a straight wire, and I've got 11 volts. It's not quite a 12 volts. Maybe the battery's down a little bit from sitting, although it's been disconnected for several weeks. So I've got 10 volts there. And if I move over to from the light blue wire to the dark blue wire, that one gives me 0.8 of a volt, or basically some leakage current. But I'm not even running the test. In other words, it's giving me power on this pin, less than battery voltage. I'm going to go out for a minute and I'll check battery voltage just for the fun of it. Just a minute. All right, so I did check battery voltage, and battery voltage with the ignition on right now in the current state, so it's got some load on it. The battery voltage is 11.4, so it's losing 0.5 volt. It's not getting full voltage, but my expectation is that the driver has failed and it's feeding power full time. onto that pin. And about the only way that I could test that, one would be to pull the pin out, and I don't have the right tools to do it. I was looking to see if I could find a way to sneak that pin out so I could just measure the terminal, sneak the terminal out so I could just measure the pin. That isn't going to work. I don't think I want to fire it up with the terminal, with that connector removed, because that may have other issues. And the way that, my only other choice would be to unwrap this and cut the wire and then splice it back together again. I thought I might do that, but those harnesses are, it's wrapped right up to the end, and I really hate to unwrap and have all that wire loose. For the, I'm going to say, the unlikely possibility that this blue wire has a short to power somewhere between here and the engine compartment, I just don't believe it. So what I think I'm going to do is, next, I'm going to go out and test the motor, and then I'm going to get an ECM and swap it. And I suppose there's a risk, it's about $100, and I suppose there's a risk that this ECM is okay, but it sure doesn't look very promising. Well, I've decided I'm not going to test the motor today. I've got my stack of jumper wires here, and I got a bale of them. It's a 4-pin connector, but it's the the towers have to go in, and then there's a female pin inside, and I'll tell you, you can't see. It's a tight right angle turn, and I've been trying for about 20 minutes or so to see if I could sneak a pin into the connector, into the right cavities, and I can't, not with confidence. And I don't want to damage the pins that are in there. The book recommends that you get a 4-pin shell, 4-pin pigtail, and connect to that because it's difficult. And now I see why they suggest that. So that's that's something for me to do the next time. So I need to see if I can get myself an ECM and a shell for the next time I come here, so that I can pick that motor up and test the motor and make sure it's good. I'm just not sure. The other thing with the ECM is verifying the part number. I think that one's been replaced sometime along the way because the label is missing off the, there's a serial number label, but the main part number label that there's a spot where you can see adhesive where there was a label of some sort. Beyond that, I pulled the cover off where the proms go, and I have the numbers off the proms. And I have found online, somebody had posted an old parts manual with the service number of the ECM that goes along with those proms. And secondly, I found another service bulletin that says, based on the breakpoint of the car from a VIN number, which ECM it should have. And so anyway, I'm going to go get parts, and it'll probably be a few weeks before I get back to this car, but we'll come back and see what we can do to get her up and running. I'm working on the 864 today, again. I thought I'd reached the point where I was going to replace the ECM, but I decided I'm going to run a couple more tests first. The problem I was worried about was I didn't want to power up the ECM with one connector unhooked for fear I would damage something. And afterwards I'm going like, duh, dummy. Just take all 3 connectors off the ECM, disconnect it completely, and then test it. So I'm going to do that. There are 2 things. One is I'm going to test that to verify that I don't have a short circuit into the wire. I'm going to power it up, double check the system, and make sure that that it's still bad, I'll call it. Then I'm going to disconnect the ECM entirely. And then finally, So I bought a pigtail, the correct pigtail, so that I can test the idle speed motor by jumpering power to it per the service manual. So, okay, so I went under hood, checked pin D with the ignition on, and it's hot all the time still. It hasn't fixed itself. So, you can see where those connectors are. It's like, you can see that position. I've got it powered off. I'm going to go ahead and remove all three of those and then go back and retest. Okay, so now I got the ECM unhooked. The ignition is on. There's no ECM power. And I want to pick up pin D, which is the one at the top here, and see if the light works. And it does not. It's out. So I have no power on any of these. All right. So that pretty much says the ECM is bad, because I just tested this a minute ago, and that D was lighting up from the start. So with that, then the next step is I'm going to get my new pigtail and hook it to the motor down here. And that one's a little trickier. I need to get 12-volt power, and they want you to put 12-volt power on the motor on pins C and D, but definitely not on A and B, because if you do A and B, you'll burn out the switch in there. One other thing that I should mention, when you're testing this, I found on a replacement ECM instruction sheet, I found a note that said, don't ever unplug this connector from the motor while the system is powered up, because it will damage the driver. Now, in this case, this driver, I may have done that, but this driver was bad before I started, before I ever did anything like that. Things were in trouble. But I'm going to be extra careful not to do that. Make sure I don't ever do that. Well, before I test it with power, just for curiosity's sake here, I've got this set. Oh, I got turned. I got this set on resistance. Get it set in a good spot here. And the two green wires are C and D, which are the ones that go to the motor. The pink and black go to the switch. So what I'm curious about is, what is the winding resistance on this motor if it's measurable? I don't know. They don't give you a resistance check in the book, so we're just going to hook up. I'm just going to touch the two green ones here and see what we get for resistance. That's 70 ohms that way. And if I reverse it, just to make sure, because sometimes you'll get diodes in there, and it's 71 ohms the other way. All right, so that's consistent. It's not like an extremely low value that should hurt the ECM. Okay. All right, so I want to watch this. What I've done is hooked a jumper lead. This lower pin on the connector goes to ground. So I took the ground, hooked it to one of the green wires that goes to the motor, hooked the other green wire to an extension lead off to the side here. Normally, I don't like to do this without having a fuse in the line, but it's going to be a momentary contact type of situation. So if anything happens, I'll uncontact it. What I'm going to do is go over to the battery and hit 12 volts on the end of this wire. And I think this one is set up so that it should be retracting in this direction. That looks like it pulled all the way back in, right? All right, so now let's switch them, see if it goes the other way. Okay, so we'll go all the way out. Do this one more time. It seems as though the motor's doing what it's supposed to do. One more time around, just for fun. There it goes again. All right. Well, that says that the throttle motor's working. And the resistance value was good. So that should be all right, and I ought to be able to replace the ECM and this should work. So, well, that's all for right now. I need to go order an ECM, and it'll be a few weeks before I'm back at that. But it's the next step. So I'm going to get an ECM, swap it, and see if we can make this work. That's all for now.